Did you know that people with public speaking anxiety say things to themselves that increase their anxiety? And people with low speaking anxiety say things to themselves that reduce their anxiety. And I've always wondered what people in the lower anxiety range say to themselves before they speak, while they're speaking, and after they speak. What's the dialogue going on in their head? In contrast, what's the higher anxiety group saying to themselves? Now, we know that the higher anxiety group is very internally focused. They're continually scanning their bodies for fight or flight symptoms, and they're distressed by those symptoms. And it makes sense because they've experienced anxiety in the higher painful ranges where the symptoms make it difficult to speak. And it's humiliating when you're in a group and you feel like you can't do a basic thing like introduce yourself and speak. And the higher anxiety group is constantly in their heads evaluating how they're coming across to other people and criticizing their performance. The higher anxiety group typically is thinking things like, I should be calm and have no anxiety. Something's wrong if I have some anxiety. If I show some anxiety and other people see it, I'm a loser. They may be saying things like, oh, this isn't going well. This should be coming out of my mouth better. I should be doing better. So, in contrast, I'm curious, what is the lower anxiety group thinking? What's going on in their heads? I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Karen Mason. She's a psychologist who was recently a keynote speaker at a conference, and she's testified in front of the Massachusetts State Legislature, which is a really high stakes speaking event, and has done quite a bit of public speaking. Now, I wanted to talk to a psychologist because psychologists are trained to be aware of what's going on inside of other people's heads, and they are typically aware of what's going on inside of their own heads. Now, not everyone is aware of their own self talk. So I'm hoping to dig into her self talk when she speaks in public. Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, hey, just wanted to chat just a little bit about public speaking anxiety. I know
Mhm.
you told me recently that you've been in some very high stakes events where you've been speaking and you get very little anxiety, and I was intrigued by that. And I'm wondering if you would tell us just a little bit about your experience when you testified before the Massachusetts legislature with your boss present and how that was and how much anxiety you had during that event.
Yes. Well, that was high stakes for me just because it was actually a joint committee. There were House of Representatives there. There were senators there from, the legislature in Massachusetts. And they were debating, they were asking for public comment on the issue of assisted suicide. And my area of research is suicide prevention. And so I was very interested in this, and I know the literature that's related to laws passed on assisted suicide and how that affects the suicide rate in states where that has happened. And so I was open to testifying, but it was my boss that dragged me there. He's the president of the school where I teach. He was an ethicist, and so he was very interested in the topic. So he dragged me to go along. And I was very anxious. I was very anxious. That was a difficult one for me because I had never done it before. So, I have been in many public speaking settings, and I think that I don't feel very anxious in a lot of those because I've done it before. But this one was a completely new one for me. You didn't know when you were going to present because uh, it depended on who signed up to present, and so there. I think we got there like at, let's say, 10 a.m. I'll just say, I don't know. I don't think we presented till maybe 1 or 2 p.m.
Ooh,
So there was
wow.
a long time to be anxious. And uh, so I remember saying to myself often, um, I just remember saying to myself, look, I'm going to go up there, I'm going to do this thing, and then it'll be over with.
Yeah.
And I'll be fine. I'll still be alive. I'm gonna go up there. I'm just gonna do my thing, and then I can go home. And that's gonna feel so good to me. So I think I was managing my anxiety that way. So part of the issue was I had to wait so long. And so, you can't stay anxious that long. Um, and I just kept saying, look, it's gonna happen. I The one thing in life that I know is that hard things happen and then they're over with. Yeah, my mom always said, "This too shall pass." And I think that's my attitude towards I'm gonna get through it. It's gonna happen. I'm gonna be really anxious and then I'll be done and I can go home. And
Yeah.
so so then when it finally happened, when we got called up, my boss had written my name down on the roster of people who were going to present, and he had written it so illegibly that they called my name and I didn't even recognize it, and so I was anxious because of that. And so the thing I could remember feeling really anxious about at the time was that I forgot to introduce myself because they had said my name wrong. And so I got anxious and I didn't even say, "Hey, my name is Dr. Karen Mason. I'm a psychologist. I've been studying suicide prevention for years." I I didn't even say that, and I can remember feeling anxious that I hadn't said it.
Right.
And so, the thing that I said to myself in that moment is, just keep going. Just keep going. So what? So you made a mistake. Oh well, like keep going. And the other thing that I tend to do to reduce my anxiety is I prepare well ahead of time, and I had notes. And so even though I had my notes with my name and my credentials, I had forgotten that part, even though it was that's okay. It was I didn't have that part done, but I was able to share the research that I really did want to share on the topic area, and I felt like I had something important to say. And oh well, so my boss got to see me make a big mistake. Oh well, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing for a while, but I'm not going to lose my job over this.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I love that because that's what I hear from, so many people where it really helps them reduce their anxiety is where they can really get behind that message. They really believe in a message and they really have something important that they want to say, and that's what you felt that day. You wanted to deliver a message and you felt like you got your message across,
I got it across. Yeah. I didn't
which is great.
remember to say who I was and why
Yeah.
I think I was an important person to deliver it, but mistakes happen. And
Yeah, and I love that too because I that's really what the research shows with people with public speaking anxiety is that uh, perfectionistic standards really increase your anxiety. And if you can reduce your perfectionistic standards a little bit and accept that you're going to maybe make mistakes, but you're getting your message across, and that's really all that matters. That's what sounds like you were saying to yourself.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think the reason I tend to have low uh I used to have high public anxiety when I first started speaking in public, but I mean, I've been doing this now for a while, and so I think the reason it's low at this point in time is just, you know I'm excited to share my message.
Yeah.
I
Right.
really want to talk to people about suicide prevention.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
You're passionate about it.
I'm passionate about it.
Yeah. No,
And
that's
give me a chance to talk about it, I'm going to come talk to you about it. So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Now, what do you think in terms of your anxiety during the event? What do you think it was? I mean, do you think it was kind of medium to high, or where do you think it was while you were talking? And was your heart beating? What was going on for you?
I think when I realized, hey, I never even introduced myself, I think my heart started beating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing I tend to say to myself, in all public speaking events is I usually try to memorize the first three sentences.
Uh-huh.
And because I say to myself, Karen, you're going to have anxiety at the beginning.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
will. And
Yes.
and if you can just make it through the first three sentences, you're going to be fine. Like you're going to settle down. So I think, though, that I would guess that once I sat there and realized, oh my goodness, I didn't even introduce myself. I think it was probably at an 8. I would guess
Wow.
it was
Really
really,
high.
really high,
Yeah.
and I think it was pretty medium, fairly medium high the whole way through, just because it was such a novel experience for me.
Yeah.
So I would guess it was in the 5 or 6 range. I knew it was gonna be hard material, complicated material, and so uh, I went ahead and prepared well ahead of time, had it written down as kind of clearly as I could. I had practiced it to and I usually practice out loud just so I can hear myself say it and am I able to say this out loud? Um,
Oh,
am I
that's good. Good technique.
to communicate this out loud? And I never, whenever I do public speaking, I never have an exact script because I feel like the message comes across more genuinely, for me at least, if I can have the basic ideas, but then present it in my kind of warm conversational way.
Yeah. Right. So that there's some spontaneity, so
Yeah,
it's not scripted and
that's right.
robotic.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
try not to be scripted, but I try to be really organized. I try to have thought ahead. What needs to be said first, second, and third in order to make this understandable.
And then do you find the same thing like with impromptu speaking, that that's also easy for you, or is that a little harder because then you're not able to prepare ahead of time?
Yeah, I do not like impromptu speaking.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Don't like it.
Yeah.
That would be where my anxiety would go up.
Right.
But
Right.
if somebody asked me to just, excuse me, if it needs to sound intelligent, I don't like it. If it's about, like, what do I like about my job? I think I can do that. But yeah, because
Yeah.
that doesn't require any kind of training to come up with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it has to be knowledgeable in some way, I don't like
Yeah.
to in an impromptu way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
You'd rather prepare.
right. I mean, I do. I led a group discussion recently and could not have predicted what the questions were going to be. And so, you have to be ready on your feet to some extent. Um, but the other thing I say, and hopefully this is what people can say when they do public speaking, is I know what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
it-
Right.
I'm not, I've been paying attention in my life and there are things that I know, and and maybe these people need to hear that. So
Yeah.
that's
And
what
that is your area of expertise. You know what you're talking about.
right. I know what I'm talking about. Right. The
Yeah.
group discussion I recently led was not related to suicide prevention, but it was related to, me being a psychologist and how about group dynamics and how people process emotions and that sort of thing. And boy, after being a mental health professional for 32 plus years, I hope I know some of that.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So you could rely on those skills.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
that's what I keep saying to myself, even though there are going to be questions that get asked that I can't prepare for. Yeah, I know something about this.
Yeah. Right. So you can
And,
keep telling yourself that. Yeah.
and if I don't know, all I have to do is say I don't know.
Right. Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
how hard is that?
Yeah. And you can say to yourself, "Hey, I am a human being. I don't need to know everything."
I
Right?
don't
I can't know everything.
I can't know everything. I won't know everything. And people who ask questions that I feel stumped by, good for them. Good for them for coming up with a good question.
And you can always say, "Hey, I'll get back to you," right?
I'll get back to you. I do that with my students all the time. Um, or or I ask my student to go do the research on it.
That's the nice thing about being a professor.
That's right.
That's great. Well, one of the things that I heard you say, and I do hear professional speaking coaches tell their clients this a lot, is, a key technique is focus on your message.
Yeah.
And that's exactly one of the key techniques that it sounds like you use all the time. The other one that I hear from professional speakers and coaches is memorize the introduction. Memorize, like you were saying, your first few lines, because you're anticipating that spike of anxiety. You're
Yeah.
going to get it,
Yeah.
and then if you can just kind of get through that spike, ride the wave, get on the other side of the wave,
Yeah.
the anxiety will go down.
That's right. And there
Yeah,
are certain things also. So recently I was a keynote at a conference and I think the room probably had, you know, 300 to 400 people in it. And I just didn't want to forget the people who invited me. I didn't want to forget to thank them.
right.
So being that was the other thing that I always try to memorize. Like what are the not just my key message, but what do I want to make sure to say right out of the gate? Like
Yeah,
thanks for inviting me and the people that I've been working with have been wonderful and blah blah blah. So just want to not forget that.
yeah,
And that's what I try to memorize, not just how I'm gonna get through the beginning. And there are certain concepts that I might find difficult even through the presentation. And so I want to be sure to practice those a few times,
yeah,
like
right.
what do I say about this particular area of suicide prevention, and how do you how do you talk about this without offending a group of people? So there are certain things also that I like to think about ahead of time and practice a few times.
Yeah. And like you said, practice out loud so you can hear yourself, hear how it
Right.
sounds.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right. If
Good,
I
good.
if I find that there are really specific words that I want to be able to use in those moments, then and I typically use PowerPoint slides, I make sure to put them in the notes section.
Yeah, because that'll trigger you
That'll trigger me
to
just
remember. Yeah,
sure I use those words that I want to use.
yeah. Right, right. Great. Well, just wondering if there are any other kind of final thoughts that you have about just anything else that you say to yourself, or anything that's helpful, or anything else that might help other people with
Yeah,
public speaking anxiety.
I think the other thing that helps me is once I get going, I know it's going to be fun. So
Yeah.
at the beginning, I'm always thinking, why did I say yes to this? Like, why did
Yeah.
I agree to do this? And then, once I get going, then there's an actual kind of joy that comes with it. Like I would
Yeah.
even joy. Like I'm
Yeah.
enjoying interacting with my listeners, my audience. I'm trying to figure out who they are, and I'm presenting something that's important to me, but I also want to be relevant to them. I'm listening to how they're responding to me, and so I'm there's it that could be fun.
I love that. I love that. And the other thing that I always hear from professional speakers is that they actually interpret that burst of adrenaline that they get, that spike, they interpret it as excitement and as energy. And
Mhm.
and the adrenaline really is energy.
Yeah.
Uh, and they interpret it that way, not as anxiety, but as excitement. And I think that that fits in with what you were saying. And
Mhm.
then once that spike, goes down and you kind of get into your zone a little bit, like you said, it can just be joy. It can just be a lot of fun.
Fun, like, and I feel
Yeah.
like, if you're interacting with your audience, that kind of carries you through. The other thing that occurs to me is, and I'm trying to remember, I think that I might have learned this in a speech class somewhere, but just to take a minute before you get started, to before you jump in, like don't start talking while you're walking up to your podium. Like,
Yeah.
wait till you're there. Get yourself a little bit organized if you need to take a minute.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna begrudge you taking a minute just to get yourself a little bit organized and
Yeah.
and ready if you need that.
That's right. I have seen a lot of professional speakers do that. They'll get up to the podium and they'll take a drink of water, or they'll pause for a minute and just collect their thoughts
Yeah.
and then jump in. And so you're saying, yeah, don't rush. You don't, you're in control and take your time.
Take your time. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
There to deliver a message, and for some reason you got asked to do it. So do it
Yeah. Right.
and enjoy the opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
not everybody asks you to do those kinds of things always.
Yeah.
You don't get asked every day. Maybe there are some people that get asked every day to share something that's important to them, but for the most part, it's an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, what a great way to reframe it from, something bad to an opportunity to get across a very important message.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Wonderful. Well, Karen, really appreciate your time being with us today and so appreciate all of these insights. I have really wanted to interview you for a while, and I've wanted to, interview a psychologist who has that awareness of what's going on inside of your head, just to see what you're thinking, before the event, during the event. Really appreciate all of your insights and your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, great. Okay, bye bye.
Bye.